players who make a ton of money have a terrible season and still feel like a pay cut is off the table. You know, dime a dozen story. And oh yeah, Dez Bryant. Despite failing to go over 100 yards in any of his 15 games this year, he's now pointing the finger at himself. The Cowboys missing the playoffs. Take a listen.
I feel like for the most part, I can only do what, you know, I can control. Yeah, in bitter times, hell, you know, frustrating, you know, certain situations, you know, that I couldn't control. But other than that, I believe who I am. I'm a hell of a football player. I know that. I believe that.
They come to you for a pay cut. Are you cool with that?
Whenever I haven't heard no talks about that. But if it come, well, I don't know. Probably not. Hell nah, man. I believe in me.
All right, CeCe, there's a lot to discuss here. There's salary cap, there's the way he played, there's all of it. But bottom line, should Sunday be Dez's last game as a Cowboy?
That's really hard to say, because let's look at the amount of money. Over the next 2 years, they're going to pay Dez like $24 million. If you look at the receivers that are making $10 to $14 million, is he worth the money? So either you're paying him for what he's done, or you're going to pay him for what he's going to do. And that's kind of the dilemma, because he is descending in his productivity. Now, even though he's not that old now, so he's playing like an older receiver. He's playing like he's already in his 30s and compiling numbers like he's in his 30s, and he's not in his 30s yet. Like, Dez is 29 years old. And that's shocking to see at this point. He should still be in his prime as one of the great athletes that's played the position over the last 10 years in the NFL. Dez, to me, would still be maybe 2 or 3 more years in his prime before I start to see him decline. There's only a few receivers in the NFL that once they reach 30, that they have been as effective as they were in their 20s. Right now we have Larry Fitzgerald. He is the standard bearer in the NFL as far as productivity, and now being, I think Larry's 33. Last year, Pierre Garçon, he was over 30 and had 1,000 yards. He ended up getting hurt this year. Last year, Edelman, he was 30. He had 1,000 yards. He ended up getting hurt this year. So there's not a lot of guys in the NFL. You would think that, wow, receivers are far more productive. They haven't been that productive in their 30s. So for me, it's a huge concern. I think he will still be on the Cowboys. I don't think his is his last game. I don't think that's the answer. But when you are making the kind of money he's making, you have set yourself up for the organization to come to you and ask you to take a pay cut. These are the things that have happened to other players. Is Jerry going to do that with Dez? That's the part I don't know. But I do expect Dez to be on the Cowboys in 2018.
All right, first I want to respond to something you said, which is the short list of wide receivers in their 30s that have had huge years. That is a short list. You know what is an even shorter list? You know what is a list that is 0 people long? The list of wide receivers that had been great, had 3 bad years, and then been great again. That doesn't happen.
Right.
So, like, it's already long odds that a guy at his age, even if he had just sustained excellence, was going to further sustain excellence. But nobody has the career trajectory of up, 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 Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, awesome, bad, 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 and then back there, unless that bad, bad, bad is due to fluke, devastating injury. One injury, you miss a year and a half, and then you come back.
Not being paired up with a guy like Dak Prescott.
Right.
That's not something you can point to.
No, there's no precedent for it. Especially, I wouldn't blame it on Dak, but let's say it were Dak. Dak's going to be there next year. So it's not like that's going to change. They're not bringing in a new quarterback. Dez Bryant next year, on his current contract, has the 3rd biggest cap hit of any receiver in football. $16.5 million. CeCe's right that his salary is $12 million, but because of the way they do bonuses, he has $4 million there. $16.5 million. You can't just look at that and say, well, he's not $16.5 million receiver, get rid of him. If they cut him, they only save $8 million. So what you have to ask yourself is Dez worth $8 million? And at his current production, the answer to that question is no as well. The receivers who make around $8 to $9 million, Kenny Stills, Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, Brandon Cooks, Mohamed Sanu, all those guys are better than Dez right now. All of them had better years than Dez right now. Show Dez his numbers this season. Just show the audience where he's at. What is he? He's not in the top 20 in anything. He's not in the top 80 in yards after catch. The only thing he's top 15 in is targets. He still gets targeted like he's great, but he's not. And so even though you only save $8 million, to me, I think the Cowboys could better use that $8 million on a different receiver. So the answer to my question is, should this be his last game as a Cowboy? For their purposes, I think the answer is yes.
Right.
I think you can get better at that spot.
Yeah. One of the things that's hard for me is I try to reconcile in my mind how much better a football player I was at 31, 32 compared to being 27. So I actually went back to look at where I was athletically at the same time Dez is right now. I believe Dez is a really good athlete. I'm not going to say Dez is a better athlete than me, but I would say our skill set could be comparable. And at 29, I felt like I was just entering into my prime. And when I was 29, Nick, was the 1994 season.
Okay.
The first year we had Warren Moon. Do you remember what I did in that year, Nick?
120 catches.
122 catches.
There you go. Sorry.
And then you
two.
Yeah, and then you always get on me about my touchdowns.
12 touchdowns?
7 touchdowns.
7. Oh,
remember?
the next year was the big year. Touchdown year with Warren Moon.
Next year you had 30. I had 122 again and 17 touchdowns.
So average 12 touchdowns the 2 years with him.
So I saw myself ascending. So I can see where people can get better. I just don't see, because those 3 seasons leading up to that. Now, I had extenuating circumstances my first 4 years before I went to Minnesota and was able to get things together. But I do believe that guys can improve. I've seen Larry Fitzgerald do it, which is very, very rare. So I still hold out hope that guys, they can learn the game and the game would slow down. The biggest difference with Dez and, say, where I was, that Tom Moore, Brian Billick, Denny Green, they moved me in the slot.
See, hold on. You knew the offense. The biggest difference was you were teaching guys the offense. The biggest difference was by the time you were 30 years old, you were an offensive coordinator on the field.
But I had to change, though.
Right, but with respect, Dez isn't all of a sudden going to go from a guy who, from a mental acuity standpoint, is only going to be able to play one spot to where all of a sudden he can play all the spots and teach guys.
But on top of that, you sat here and you've told us many, many, many times issues that Dez has had. Like, he's had some separation issues. He's catching the ball here and not there.
Right.
Those don't seem to me, maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, things that all of a sudden, when you turn 30, you're going to start to change. Like, those are the things you did when you were at the top of your game. You're not going to suddenly change those when you go into your 30. He just doesn't seem to be putting himself in a position where he's going to flip himself around and make himself so valuable to the Dallas Cowboys.
Part of it was how I approached the game, but part of it was the coaching staff realizing my skill set, and they put me in a winning situation based on they knew that I knew all the positions.
So what could they do for Dez then?
This is what's discouraging. You saw last weekend they put him in the slot. Dez is not decisive in the slot. That's why they had that interception.
Yeah.
So when you see that indecisiveness, it really hurts a young quarterback. You get turnovers, and that's what we're seeing with Dez. That's the part, to me, that's the most discouraging. They can't move him anywhere.
All right, we're going to talk more about this coming up. We'll be back right after this. This is First Things First.